Welcome to Glacier Valley. So hopefully this is the first episode in a series in which I'll be building a bunch of builds within this map that I made. You can find the download link for the base map in the description below. I begin by clearing out a large flat area to build on. I then try to mimic these stone pillars in the front facade of the Old Faithful Inn. However, I ended up giving up on that and starting elsewhere first. Another feature that was super important to me to recreate for this build is the log cabin texture. In real life, the texture of the log cabin comes from the fact that the logs are round. However, when you're dealing with square blocks, the best I could come up with was to alternate layers of wood that's similar in color. So I end up using spruce and dark oak. After trying again on the corners and being unhappy, I decided to try again in the front. At this point, I came up with this design that's cobblestone surrounded by spruce fences. It's not the exact same architectural style as these pillars that I love on the front of the Old Faithful Inn, but I think it captures the same vibe, and that's exactly what I'm trying to go for on this build. After doing some detailing on the front of the building to liven it up, I begin work on the first section of the roof. For the roof material, I decided to use blackstone because I think blackstone is a beautiful block that looks very similar to roof shingles found on old rustic buildings in the United States. I then begin the work of adding a floor in beneath the overhang of the roof and adding in these side windows. At first I wanted to do something fancy, but after realizing there just isn't enough room, I go with a simple design of upside down stairs beneath the glass panes. I then go through and add windows and doors to the front section of the building. Now that I have one section of the front facade done, I can copy and paste it and stack it up 5 times. With the bottom portion of the front facade complete, I begin extending out the roof in these little square sections of frame. I end up adding 3 more sections of roof and frame, bringing us up to a total of 4. A more realistic recreation of the inn would have probably stuck to 5, but I decided that that would have made the inn too big and would have began to mess with the scale of the mountains, making them look small. I then copy the entire front face of the building, flip it over using World Edit, and then paste it so it's lined up with the building. I also end up going through and fixing the roof seam at the top where the 2 sections meet. Next, I begin work on these frontward facing sections of window and roof. On the bottom row of the roof of the Old Faithful Inn, there are 5 of these. So once I build the first one, I copy and paste it over 5 times. The next row up uses a similar looking design, but they're slightly smaller. Additionally, the middle row has 2 of these smaller ones on the outside, and then 1 much longer one in the center. The next row up uses the same design of these smaller windows, except there's 5 of them all the way across. At first I try to add another row onto the top, but realize there's not enough space and it'll overlap the very top of the roof, so I just leave that row out. After copying and pasting the whole design to the other side, I begin clearing out some trees so I have a little bit more space to work with. I then begin work on the next section of the inn. Exactly the same as it does on the Old Faithful Inn, I decide that the back section of wall should share the same roof, but the front section, while sharing the same slope, should come down 1 section lower. I then realized that for the back section, I don't need to build a whole new one, because it shares the exact same roof and slope. I can copy and paste over the front facade 1 more time to extend it to a grand total of 7 sections rather than 5 on the back face. Starting on the 3rd section, I follow the exact same design plan, thus recentering the 3rd section relative to the roof of the 1st section. I then turn and clear out some more flat space, just to make sure that I have enough room to extend the 3rd section outwards. I then decide that before I take up a bunch of these sections and stack them together, I should finish detailing one of them first. I begin with adding these small windows on the roof, and then I flip over to the other side and begin detailing the windows on the 2 floors. I add a side door, which though I can't find any good reference photos of, I do remember entering when I was in Yellowstone last year. I then add a bunch of side windows to these frames to make them more interesting. I try around with a couple more complicated designs, but end up thinking that they're too complicated and distract from the main frame in the building, so I simplify them. I flip over to the other side, apply the same type of designs, and then the section is ready to copy and paste. I of course accidentally copy and paste a section of the roof from the second section, so after fixing that mistake, I'm ready to begin work on the next part. This next part will extend outward from the front face of the building and break up the same copy and pasted look. I have to build the roof by hand. Once that's complete, I copy and paste sections of the wall from the front of the building and put them on the wall of the new section. I then rotate those pieces to put them on the sides and finish blending the two together. After finishing that section of the building, I move over to the final side. At first I begin copying and pasting windows, trying to mimic the look of the rest of the build, but I realized that was boring, so I decided to build a giant chimney on the side of it out of cobblestone. This helps break up the color palette of the build. I then copy everything that we've built since the very first section of the building, flip it around, and paste it on the left side of the build. After pasting the left side of the building, I realized that we've dug significantly into the surrounding terrain and that we'll need to begin doing work to blend the build within the biome. After clearing out an even larger area to work with, I begin building the contour lines that will define the slope of the hill that we're creating to blend our build in with the surrounding terrain. I build the edges of each contour out of orange concrete because it can be very easy to get lost in each layer as you're building upward, especially with the side grass textures used by Optifine. After each contour has been built, I fill in the area inside of it with grass blocks. I realize now in retrospect that I absolutely could have done this much more easily using world edit brushes. However, I'm used to doing all of my terraforming with World Painter before I even start the builds, so it didn't even occur to me that I could do terraforming with the world edit brushes. The final bit of terraforming that I hope to do for this project to really complete the feel is to build a large lake. This is yet another thing I really wish I had done in World Painter when I was planning out this project, but it's too late now, so I'm gonna have to figure out a way to do it with world edit. I begin by making a selection of everything in this basin that's below 35 blocks, then filling it in with diamond so as to see exactly where the lake is going to be placed. Once I figured out where the lake is going to be placed, I use brushes to remove all of the trees and grass. And finally, I really don't like how far back the lodge is set from the lake. I was hoping to have the lake nearer to the back entrance, so I built a little branch going back that will hopefully accommodate those needs. To finish up the landscaping for this build, I head back toward the front of the building and begin by adding this cobblestone sidewalk around the entire perimeter of the build. Next, I experiment with a couple different brushes that adds a path, sort of like the main highway leading up to the hotel. I don't want this to be a modern look with a modern road. I want this to look as it would have perhaps in the early 1900s. Next, I use world edit brushes to copy and paste a bunch of the same trees that I used on the original World Painter map for this build. Once reforestation is complete, I head over to the side of the lodge and begin building a small dock. I was struggling to come up with my own design for this dock, so I followed one by Lenny Random, and I'll link that video in the description. And now for the cinematic.